Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. The time has come. The time has come to finally sit down and discuss one of the hottest topics circulating Hollywood and fandom at the moment. And that is the evident downfall of Marvel Studios. I know, I can't believe we are having this discussion. If you rewind the clock back to 2019, none of us would have predicted that we would be having this discussion today. Like, it would have just been an impossibility. And yet here we are. And to make matters worse, this isn't even the first video that I've made on this topic, because just last year I sat down and recorded a similar video, this time around delving into the problems with phase 4 of the MCU, which you can check out on my channel. And this is going to be sort of a companion piece, except in that video I mostly focused on the creative issues, things to do with the inconsistency in storytelling, the multiverse being handled poorly despite the fact that this was supposed to be a multiverse saga. That sort of commentary is what you can find in last year's video. This year though, we are going to be talking about some more serious issues. We're talking about issues that are industry-wide but also company-wide within Marvel Studios. We're not just talking about whether or not I liked Loki season 2 and the jury's still out, okay? Let's see the season finale next week. But we're not just talking about that. We are talking about some serious controversies, some serious issues with practice and workplace environments, and also some creatives, the decisions that have been made by some of the creatives working at Marvel Studios today. For this video, we are really going to be delving into the inner workings of Marvel Studios as it stands at the moment, and taking a look at how this could possibly explain some of the inconsistencies in quality that we have been seeing from the recent phases of the MCU. Now, those of you who have seen my community posts recently will know that I have been planning this video for a few days now, and I have put up a few polls for you guys to partake in, to take a look to see where people's opinions are when it comes to phases 4 and 5 of the MCU so far. So I can't wait to dive into that. And as I said, I will be naming you guys, and thank you so much for partaking in the polls and sharing your thoughts on this issue. Clearly you guys had a lot to say. Okay, you had a lot on your minds, just like I did. So I'm really excited to continue the discussion with this video, and hopefully with the comments down below where you guys can let me know what your thoughts are after this. And if you haven't seen the community posts on my channel, feel free to check them out. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, then please be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado guys, let's dive into the downfall of Marvel Studios. Now, what pushed me to make this video to begin with was this expose in Variety that came out last week that was extremely damning for Marvel Studios. And that article, which I'll link down below in the description, really laid out several of the issues that Marvel Studios has been facing over the last few years. And it also, of course, inferred that these issues behind the scenes have kind of led to the inconsistencies that we have been seeing on screen. Okay, so before we dive into the pressing issues that Marvel Studios has been facing as of late, we are going to take a few steps back and rewind a little bit to talk about one of the root causes of a lot of these problems. And to me, that is the Disney Plus mandate. I believe, and the Variety article is in agreement with me with this, that a lot of Marvel Studios' issues, especially when it comes to the quality of work that they've been pumping out, can be traced back to 2020 when Disney Plus started. When Bob Iger decided to chase after tech companies like Netflix and Amazon to create a streaming service for the studio, I don't think he quite anticipated the amount of issues and problems that he would be facing along the way. Now, he didn't have to face those issues and problems for very long, because he stepped down and retired soon after launching Disney Plus. That was kind of his final baby, his last child. And then we had Bob Chapek take over and just run this thing to the ground. promptly run this thing to the ground. And so Bob Iger had to come back out of retirement to see what he could do to fix things, except he hasn't been doing a great job of that. So let's see how that actually works in the long term. But I would say that this was the beginning of the end, pretty much, for Marvel Studios, because clearly, evidently, as I've said in previous videos, streaming is a bottomless pit of content. It is unsatiable. You need to feed the beast in order for it to survive, and none of these studios can afford the diet that streaming needs in order to stay alive. And Disney is no exception to this, despite the fact that Disney thought they were prepared with the sheer amount of stuff that streaming services require. You know, Bob Iger made the Fox acquisition just in time for this to launch, with a ton of stuff from the Fox back catalog, and of course, you know, giving the MCU and Kevin Feige some used toys to play with in the near future. It all seemed like a really great plan to beef up their streaming service, but they had no idea that streaming services are insatiable beasts that forever need to be fed, and they just cannot keep up with the rate at which they need to be fed to prevent churn from the audience. And so unfortunately, not even Disney's impressive catalogue of IPs could handle the demands of this new streaming service without suffering some injuries themselves. And Star Wars is an example of that. You know, these streaming services have definitely had both positive but also negative effects on the Star Wars brand. I actually think that Disney Plus has been more of a boon to Star Wars than it has been to Marvel. But speaking of Marvel, Marvel is yet another casualty of this streaming service that Bob Iger left behind as his legacy, because oh boy, as soon as Disney Plus was set to launch, there were orders from on high that Kevin Feige had to follow to pump out more Marvel content to supply the service with, to draw people into Disney Plus. And everyone thought that was a great idea, by the way. I'm not gonna sit here and say I thought this was a terrible idea from the beginning. I thought this would work out just fine. I mean, the service itself was released in like 2019, 2020, and this was right after a humongous year for the MCU. They literally delivered the highest grossing film of all time before it was superseded by Avatar again because of a re-release, but already they were at their peak. You know, they had reached new heights, and so of course everyone thought it was a great idea to use that popularity and use that name recognition and IP recognition to bolster the streaming service at Disney. I think very few people could have foreseen just how badly things would go, but we had no idea how much of a strain these Disney Plus shows would have on the franchise and on its god, on its king, Kevin Feige. Now, I already discussed the issue of quantity over quality over at Marvel Studios last year in my previous video, but we do have an update on the matter from earlier this year, where Bob Iger himself said, and I quote, that the Disney Plus shows diluted focus and attention within the franchise. So this is pretty much an admission by Bob Iger himself. Again, the guy who came up with, you know, Disney Plus as his final hurrah at the company, that it was a bad idea for Marvel to be stretched so thin, because the idea of Marvel producing like what, I think it was like 5 Disney Plus shows in 2021 alongside 3 films. I mean, it was just too much. Now, to be fair, they did have that break in 2020, which was unintentional because obviously there was the pandemic and everything was put on hold, and so 2021 felt a lot more bloated than it should have because of that break from 2020. But unfortunately, that doesn't really change the audience's perception of the franchise being far too saturated, and it certainly doesn't help that the genre overall is far too saturated, with a lot of people screaming, crying, superhero fatigue louder than ever before. And speaking of superhero fatigue, that reminds me of the first poll that I dropped earlier this week on my channel, where I asked you guys, what's the biggest problem facing the MCU MCU right now. And the results of this poll were really interesting because only 6% of you believed that the loss of the OG Avengers / there not being any good replacements for them was the biggest issue facing the MCU. And then next one up, we have 17% thinking loss of interest in the franchise after Endgame is the biggest issue. Next one up, we have superhero fatigue at 21%. But it seems that even with superhero fatigue being a factor, the biggest issue in you guys' opinion that is facing the MCU right now is low quality / lack of creative direction in phase 4 and 5. That came in at 55%. Over half of you guys think that this is the biggest issue. And do you know what? I completely agree. I did ask you guys to comment down below so you could share your own thoughts on the matter. And first comment up is from Mark Candlish 461. Hi Mark. And he said, hi Jean, for me they produce too much content in a single year and the quality has slipped some. Not all projects are of high enough standard. Less is more in my opinion. So here you have the combination of there being low quality but also high quantity. Again, this is a concern that a lot of people have had for phases 4 and 5, and I completely agree with this. I think the fact that they're trying to throw so much at the wall and just see what sticks, and clearly a lot of things aren't sticking, has really damaged the reputation of the franchise overall. Next comment up we've got is from Signal Fire 15. Hi Signal. And they say definitely superhero fatigue. Oh, definitely superhero fatigue. There is just oversaturation with the combination of the movies and TV shows, and that it's too hard to keep up with everything and have it flow into one single cohesive story. I have to watch the movies first and let my brother know which shows he needs to watch in order to prepare for the movie, like watching WandaVision before seeing Doctor Strange 2. The oversaturation also leads to lack of anticipation or hype for upcoming movies, and it's mostly just a cash grab / lacks integrity. I think my favorite Marvel movie recently has been Shang-Chi, and that was because the story functioned on its own. Okay, so here we have several things, right? We have superhero fatigue, where there's just too many superhero projects coming out, not just from Marvel, also from DC and other parties like Amazon killing it with Invincible and The Boys and Gen V. Even if the projects are good and we're having a great time with them, the matter of the fact is that there are still too many. There are still too many within this kind of subgenre, and it's feeling a little bit overwhelming. Now Signal here is mostly talking about the MCU and talking about how you have to do so much homework for a lot of these projects. And again, it's crazy because, you know, thinking back to when they first announced these Disney Plus shows, I thought it'd be a great idea to have some of these shows be interconnected to the movies, so that you could kind of get a glimpse of what was going on behind the scenes before you prepare for the big film. Like, in theory it made sense, but I think with the execution being so confusing and so inconsistent, and I'm not just talking about quality here, but also in terms of ideas, like the idea of the multiverse has not been consistent throughout. As I mentioned in last year's video, you know, the idea of the multiverse is different in Loki than it is in Doctor Strange 2 and Spider-Man No Way Home and What If. You know, they don't have a through line despite the fact that this is supposed to be the multiverse saga. So that kind of chaoticness is just not coherent, as Signal said. And it certainly doesn't help that you feel like, or you're pressured into thinking that you have to do all of this homework only for you to go sit down in the cinema, watch the film and realize that it has very little to do with the homework that you've been doing over the past couple of years. It's kind of like, you know, studying really hard for an exam, feeling like you're prepared for it, and then the exam is on something completely different. It's like on a module that you haven't even covered in school yet. Okay, so the next comment up we've got is from Sleepy. Hi Sleepy, a treasured member of our community. And Sleepy said, I personally believe it's Feige's refusal to properly represent queer people and experiences coming back to bite him in the ass, and I love it. That is so sassy. That is sassy, Sleepy. You're a G for that. That's incredible. But I think there is something to this. I don't think that is the main issue facing the MCU, but I do think that there is this conundrum where obviously phases 4 and 5 have tried to have a more representation of different groups of people that have been, you know, previously underrepresented within the franchise and also in Hollywood overall. And I have been a proponent of this from the beginning. I have been a proponent of this from the beginning, okay? I think this is a good thing, but I think it only works if you have good storytelling and if you do it with, you know, intention and thought, instead of just throwing it in there and just hoping to see if it works. You know, I think that actually does a disservice to that kind of representation. And oftentimes you see the stars of these projects like Miss Marvel or She-Hulk get the brunt of the blame, when in reality it's the machine working behind the scenes that has set them up for failure. And I think that applies to queer representation, as Sleepy has said. For instance, you have Loki, where they kind of dropped in and insinuated that he could be bisexual and then just did nothing with that. Literally did nothing with that. And it's like, for what? Like, is that supposed to be representation that we've been gunning for? No. So I think in that sense there's also been disappointment regarding the types of representation that we have been getting in the MCU in the last few phases. Okay, so the next comment is from Edwina, who says, it's the lack of understanding of what is going on creating a divide. They pivot to try and please people and make it worse. Honestly, it's hard to create something when millions of people are playing writer, director and executive producer. This is true. This is also true, to be fair. When you have millions of people who all have an idea of how this franchise should be, especially after it's reached its height with Avengers Endgame, it's a tall order. Honestly, it's a really tricky task to complete. And then they said the first saga was great because fans just appreciated it for what it is and they built it slowly. Now the expectations are through the roof and fans expect everything to be Endgame level. Honestly, it might be a problem with the fan base. Yes, to some extent, yeah. Appreciate art for what it is, trust the vision and let it build naturally. Fan interference is causing distractions and chaos. So here, Edwina has highlighted fan distractions or fan interference as being a problem facing the MCU. I agree that it's tricky kind of managing such a huge fan base, and the MCU didn't start with that bigger fan base at the beginning, so perhaps that also enabled it to just build up naturally, and there was less pressure to please these millions of people around the world. But I still think that we do need to hold the studio accountable for its creative decisions, because the fan base can also be really loyal, myself included. Like, I'm really loyal to the MCU. I love these films, but even I can't defend Secret Invasion. Like, I can't. What do you want me to do? But there's a limit, is what I'm saying. There's a limit to what I can do, and so that is down to the creative team behind the scenes. Next comment up is from Carter Gilbert. Hi Carter. And they say, as much as I am like a die-hard fan, me too, I just don't think that there is a huge cohesive vision. Exactly. I love that we are getting niche projects that don't always connect, but I think we have gotten too many of them. Agreed. And that they don't tie to the larger universe. Exactly. To the general public, each entry no longer feels like essential viewing. That part. Why would they watch a random Marvel lawyer comedy about the She-Hulk if they aren't under the impression that it's going to matter? Who's watching a Werewolf by Night special or a series about Miss Marvel? I like a lot of this content, but I think general audiences are overwhelmed, and the times that they do try to make things connected, they hire staff and it doesn't really check the previous material to connect each project in a meaningful way. We will be discussing that. And the Marvels, I feel like this is a movie I will appreciate, but I just know most people won't. Same. But I feel like it's shaping to have big consequences, but when will they pay off? This is another thing. Oh, such an amazing comment. So here we have several issues which I absolutely agree with. We've already touched on some of them. We are going to talk about the whole people not reading up or watching material before they embark on a project. We will discuss those Rick and Morty writers, okay? But last point on the Marvels kind of touches on another issue, which is that there have been so many projects and so many introductions to brand new characters, and some of us have really enjoyed these introductions. Like the other day, we got a trailer for the Echo series coming out in January, and I wasn't particularly excited for Echo, but after seeing that trailer, I was a lot more enthusiastic. I'm like, bring it on. It looks like they may have fixed some of the problems that they had with Kingpin in the Hawkeye series. Like, it looks like they may have been listening to me. They may have been listening to me and made him a lot more like his Netflix iteration, which is exciting. But still, it's tough because you're introducing all of these new characters in phases 4 and 5, and we're not seeing follow-ups. Like, we're not seeing... In fact, Echo might be the only new character who's gotten a part 2 project within phases 4 and 5. As Carter said, you know, you have the Marvels coming out next week, or this week when you guys are watching, and that's said to have some bigger consequences, but when are we going to see the follow through from that? Next comment is from Ross 6789. Hi Ross. And they said, if the quality of MCU projects overall had stayed on or even near the height it had attained in phase 3, Marvel would be facing less than 10% of the problems that it has today. Oh, less than 10%. Okay, so quality is an issue here. The next big overarching villain defeated by ants. Oh, no one liked that. No one liked that. That was just so bad. He shouldn't have been defeated. I don't know why they defeated him. I think it's a case again of lack of communication. Why would Peyton Reed defeat Kang at the end of Ant-Man Quantumania? That made no sense to me. Let him live, let him survive another day so that he can be the big bad of the phases. Like, I don't know. Anyway, the remaining most popular characters like Wanda, Thor and Strange have been done dirty. Agree. Oh, especially Wanda and Thor. Oh, a new potential phase for fans like Wiccan in the upcoming Agatha show. Let me tell you, I'm scared, y'all. Ooh, things that I've heard about Wiccan, yeah, I'm also a little bit anxious about that. So yeah, I agree. And again, it's that similar idea of you're introducing these new characters, and when are we gonna see them? You know, when are we gonna follow through with them? And finally, we have a comment from Eliana. Hi Eliana. And they said there is too much content. Yeah, exactly. I was willing to watch 4 movies and 2 miniseries a year to satisfy my FOMO and know the memes and overall enjoy a community. Agreed. Yeah, that's true. Most pre-Endgame stuff were mediocre at best too. Hang on, I disagree with that. But being part of a fun fandom made them an enjoyable experience. Now there is too much to keep up with, and the fandom has had enough time to become toxic and gatekeepy. Star Wars. Okay, first of all, I disagree that most of the pre-Endgame stuff was mediocre, Eliana. This is where we depart. But I will say the fandom element of things is, yeah, it's unpleasant. It's become very, very unpleasant, especially as a black female MCU fan. Some of the comments that's made within these spaces are just atrocious. You know, the MCU comments, it also has put me off on occasion. So I completely agree with Eliana on that point. Like, the toxicity has reached new heights and it's starting to affect these projects significantly. Like, look at Miss Marvel with its pre-sales. It's not looking good. So yeah, I'm sick and tired of the toxicity. I'm okay with talking about quality. I'm okay with talking about these other elements. But when it just comes to, oh, it's too woke and oh, there's too many women or black people or Asians, that's where you lose me. That's where you can just go off on your little corner and be upset and cry about it, because that's not the kind of energy that we want to bring from this space. And now that we've established what our YouTube community feels are the biggest problems facing the MCU at the moment, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Continue to share them down in the comments below. But now we are going to be diving into some of the issues behind the scenes. So over half of you guys said that quality control was the biggest issue facing the MCU at the moment. And the first story in relation to this is with regards to Nia DaCosta and the Marvels. So in the Variety article, it was mentioned that Nia DaCosta DaCosta actually left the Marvel's project a few months early in order to come to London. Hey, big up to London. Because London, anyway, London town. She came to London to work on her next project, Heather, which apparently stars Tessa Thompson. And there was a quote in the article from the source which said, if you're directing a $250 million movie, it's kind of weird for the director to leave with a few months to go. Now, there were a few people on Twitter or X who said that this was a usual occurrence. For instance, Steven Spielberg was working on one of the Jurassic Park films, and then he jumped over to Schindler's List a few months before everything wrapped. So it's something that has happened before, apparently. But I do agree that it is kind of alarming that Nia DaCosta did kind of jump ship a few months before the Marvels wrapped. Now, I think a wider context is important here, because if you guys remember, the Marvels was actually due to come out, well, actually like last year or a couple of years. I mean, obviously there have been delays because of COVID, but it was supposed to come out before Ant-Man Quantumania, but the schedules were swapped around because the film needed to be reworked and there were reshoots, and that's why it's so expensive, by the way. And it was seen that Quantumania was further along in production, so that film could come out earlier than the Marvels. That ended up backfiring, and we'll discuss that later. But I do think this scheduling conflict may help to explain why Nia DaCosta had to jump on over to her next project earlier perhaps than planned, because she hadn't kind of planned for the reshoots and the delays that ended up happening for the Marvels. So that could help explain the situation and make it look a little less bad for Nia DaCosta, at least. But I also do think that there's a deeper issue here that relates to the topic of the quality of the recent Marvel films. And that is this idea that, you know, for the longest time, Kevin Feige has been running these projects with the view of fixing things in post. Again, we will be discussing this further in an upcoming topic, but in my mind, this isn't in the article, by the way, this is just me speculating. In my mind, a creative director like Nia DaCosta, who comes from, you know, the indie scene, and she had Candyman a couple of years ago, but that wasn't a huge film. But she would be the type of director who would want kind of, you know, oversight over each stage of the project, you know, that she's going to put her name on. So the idea that she comes from this indie background where you have more creative control over your projects because there's less liability and these projects are much smaller in budget and everything, to going to like a Marvel film where clearly they have a machine that's already running and there are aspects to projects that directors aren't even expected to be involved in, e.g. the action sequences, you know, as we've heard over the years. I think that may have played a factor in Nia DaCosta deciding to up and go to work on her next project, because perhaps it was felt that the machine could take it over from here. You know, once principal photography has been done, if you're just going to be working on the post-production, then the people, okay, who deal with that sort of thing in Marvel Studios would just take over. And so perhaps that is the kind of conflict or the situation that Nia DaCosta found herself in. Clearly she wasn't happy with it, because she's made comments about the situation in the past, in the last few months. But I think that may be the arrangement that kind of led her to just start working on her next project before she was completely done on this one. And it seems, unfortunately, that Nia DaCosta may have been right in prioritizing her next project instead of the Marvels, because Disney did recently host a public screening of the film in Texas for whatever reason. Why would you show the film in Texas? That's crazy. Why not New York or California? Maybe they wanted to see if like it would like work in Texas. Like if it works in Texas, it can work anywhere, sort of thing. I don't know. Anyways, but they did a screen test for the film in Texas, which is unusual because usually Marvel does screen tests amongst, you know, friends and family. They keep it within the inner circle, but they actually did a public screening this time, and unfortunately it got middling reviews. Ooh. oh, that's not great. So yeah, it's not looking great for the Marvels, both financially and critically, which breaks my heart, because this is a film that is directed by a black female director. I mean, that's huge to me. And it also has this, you know, female cast, and it's really diverse. So I want this film to do well, but at the end of the day, that damn quality that damn quality will get you every time, because even if you do have haters and they are toxic and malicious, if you're a good film, you're a good film. So the haters can just like sit in a corner and cry about it. If you're a good film, you're a good film. But if you're bad, oh, you'll never know peace. Okay, so the next headline that came out of this article was surrounding the Rick and Morty writers. The bloody Rick and Morty writers. Now, for those of you who don't know, for some reason, Kevin Feige has taken quite a liking to a few Rick and Morty writers for the last couple of phases. And so as we're talking about quality control going out the window, we need to mention that a lot of the writers that have been associated with these newer projects have been Rick and Morty writers, you know, writers that have worked on Rick and Morty. Now, in theory, this makes sense because Rick and Morty is kind of like a superhero show-esque, you know, it borrows a lot from the superhero genre. It also dives into, you know, different dimensions, the multiverse, you know, different versions of characters. So if you're working on a multiversal saga, it does make sense that you would want to get some insight from the Rick and Morty camp, but the over-reliance on these Rick and Morty writers has been astounding to me. Like, it's crazy. And we're not just talking about one person here, we're dealing with several. First of all, we have Michael Wardren, who did the first season of Loki, which, to be fair, is one of the most successful projects post-Endgame that Marvel has had, so good on him. But then he went and burned all of his good credit on Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, where it was revealed that he did not watch WandaVision. He didn't watch WandaVision prior to working on Multiverse of Madness. So for those of you who are wondering why Wanda was acting so out of character in Multiverse of Madness, well, there's your answer. There is your answer, and that is what one of the comments alluded to earlier. The idea that you would have this writer who's writing within a cinematic universe where everything is connected or should be connected, but he hasn't watched the previous project that is very relevant to one of the key characters in the project that he's working on. That is absurd. That is literal insanity to me. Like, I can't believe, and the fact that they said it, the fact that they informed the public of this. Like, if that was me, I would have kept it to myself. Why would you say this publicly? The fact that Sam Raimi and Michael Wardren were like, yeah, we didn't watch WandaVision, we just got like the highlights and that's it. Dude, go home, run home. Okay, no one is on your side with this. Run home. Because even though Wanda ended up being the best part of Multiverse of Madness, Wanda fans were furious at how she was treated, considering how WandaVision ended. There was such a disconnect between the ending of WandaVision and the start of Multiverse of Madness. Like, it's crazy that he would admit this publicly. Is he insane? And Michael Wardren is seemingly going to be rewarded for his insanity because he is slated to write Avengers Secret Wars. No. Not on my watch. No. Kevin, listen, buddy, I know you must be a fan of Rick and Morty, and we all really enjoyed Loki season 1, to be fair, although more on that later. But I don't think it's a good idea to allow Michael Wardren anywhere near the Avengers. The stakes are too high. The stakes are too high. The stakes were high enough for the Doctor Strange sequel, but for the next Avengers film, please. Please leave Michael Wardren out of this. He couldn't even be bothered to watch 9 episodes of WandaVision, which was like a half-an-hour show. Do you think he's gonna be bothered to watch 58 Marvel projects that come before Avengers Secret War? Like, don't, please do not do this, okay? Because none of the character arcs or developments are gonna make sense in that film, because my guy wouldn't have done the research beforehand. Okay, so the next Rick and Morty writer up we've got is Jeff Loveness, and Jeff Loveness has has only worked on one Marvel project so far, and that was the catastrophe that was Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Yes, this is the writer of Quantumania. He is also a Rick and Morty writer, and what can I say? You know, that kind of says it all, really. Quantumania was one of the worst received Marvel projects ever, both critically, audience-wise, and also financially. It's just a huge disaster, and there have been several repercussions for the disaster of this film. So with all due respect to Jeff, I wouldn't be calling his number anytime soon to write any future MCU projects. But again, Kevin Feige seems to have been bitten by the love bug, the Rick and Morty love bug, because he has slated Jeff Loveness to be the writer on Avengers Kang Dynasty. No, absolutely not. Not on my watch. Listen, Kevin, please just pick up the phone and make the call. This is ridiculous. Please do not do this. Now listen, there is question over whether Avengers Kang Dynasty is even going to happen. So like, that's a story for another topic. But if it is gonna go ahead, I don't want Jeff Loveness anywhere near that Avengers film. Please be serious. Anyway, next up we have Jessica Gao, who worked on She-Hulk. She was the writer and showrunner on She-Hulk, and again, like, do I even need to say anything? Now, she doesn't have any other projects slated, so maybe Kevin Feige has learned his lesson on that respect, but this is not someone that I would bring back into the fold, unfortunately. I'm sorry, but She-Hulk to me was just indefensible. Like, it didn't work as a legal drama, it didn't work as a comedy, and it certainly didn't work as a superhero show. So like, it didn't work in any angle. From any angle, it just did not work for me. So yeah, sorry, but she's got to go too. And then the last Rick and Morty writer that we've got here is Eric Martin. Now, he's an interesting one. He's an interesting one because he is the current showrunner and a lead writer on Loki season 2. But one of the key headlines from this Variety article was that Eric Martin may have been a lot more instrumental in Loki season 1 than we first believed. We all gave Michael Waldron the credit for Loki season 1 and were perplexed when he wasn't able to deliver again for Doctor Strange 2. But perhaps the secret ingredient to the formula of Loki season 1 may have been Eric Martin, who did say recently that he was a lot more involved in the writing of Loki season 1, especially after they took the break for COVID protocols. When they got back to work after the COVID protocols ended, he ended up taking the reins because Michael Waldron was off writing on Doctor Strange 2. And even at that point, they already knew that they wanted Loki to have a second season, and he was named the head writer and the showrunner for that second season, whilst Michael Waldron was off doing other things like ruining Doctor Strange. It seems as though, by his own account, Eric Martin was a lot more involved in the first season of Loki, and so people are starting to ask, well, maybe that's why the first season of Loki was actually really good. He is credited as a writer for some of the episodes for the first season of Loki, so he does have outright credit for the season finale, for instance, which explains why he's been, you know, focused so heavily on Kang and all of his variants, and why there seems to be a lot more consistency in that front from season 1 and 2 of the show, whereas other elements don't seem quite as connected. But on that note, you know, I'll be sharing my thoughts on Loki season 2 this week, actually, right? Because the season will be coming to an end. But I will say I'm willing to believe this with a grain of salt because it is coming from him. I am willing to believe that perhaps Michael Waldron wasn't as integral to the success of the show as he made it out, and, you know, judging from his work on Doctor Strange 2, he clearly did not have the secret ingredient on his own. But I still wouldn't say that Eric Martin is bulletproof either, because Loki season 2 has also had a few ingredients missing. Again, we will discuss when the season officially comes to a close this week and when you're watching. But yeah, these Rick and Morty writers, god damn it. God damn it, what was Kevin Feige thinking? Now, the next topic under the banner of lack of quality control in the MCU is we'll fix it in post. And this is in relation to what I was talking about earlier, which is a long-standing practice apparently that Kevin Feige has had when dealing with the MCU, and that has been relying heavily on post-production to streamline some things, to fix things up and make them look nice and shiny and polished, you know, just so that they're ready for general audiences. Now, it seemed like the strategy worked for the longest time, and in fact Kevin Feige was, you know, hailed for this sort of approach within the studio. But it became more of an issue later down the line because of what? The Disney Plus mandate, where all of a sudden Marvel Studios is no longer working on 2 or 3 films for an entire year. Now it has about 10-20 projects. Now it has 5 Disney Plus shows and 4 films to work on, and so this fix it in post approach just isn't gonna cut it anymore. Now, it seems like the breaking point that was reached by the VFX team over at Marvel Studios was surrounding Ant-Man Quantumania, which is funny because that seems to also be the breaking point for a lot of fans. Anyways, we'll discuss the results of that poll in a second. But yeah, it seems as though the third Ant-Man film has had the biggest repercussions for the studio, not just in terms of, you know, quality and creative decisions, but also in terms of how the studio is run. Because guess what, guys? The VFX department has decided to unionize. The VFX department literally said enough is enough. We are forming a union in order to protect ourselves from your mess, Kevin Feige, from your nonsense. So let me rewind it back in time to explain how this came about. So remember when I said that the Marvels were supposed to come out before Quantumania, but that film had a lot of issues of its own and it needed to do reshoots, and so they decided to swap over the release date so that Quantumania would be released before the Marvels, and not only because the Marvels had issues, but because it was perceived that Quantumania was further along in production. However, that perception was marred by the fact that Kevin Feige has that fix it in post approach, and so in reality Quantumania was further away from being done than they anticipated, and that led to a lot of the VFX workers being overworked, okay, with very low pay to begin with, because, you know, this industry, you know, animation and VFX work is extremely competitive and infamously low paying. So very low pay, extreme overworking, and no overtime payments. Those 3 things do not a happy worker make. So unfortunately, when Quantumania came out, among many other issues that the film had, its VFX were one of them. It was noticeably a downgrade from the usual quality of VFX that we've come to expect from these major franchises, although it was nothing in comparison to The Flash, but we move. Like, the DC VFX workers should be unionizing soon, anytime now, okay, after seeing The Flash. But anyways, so yeah, people are really upset about the VFX, the special effects, CGI in Quantumania, and even the VFX workers within Marvel Studios as well. You know, they were also shocked to see the quality of work, and it was because they were literally working on this thing until the very last minute. Like, literally, the film is coming out tomorrow and we're still doing touch-ups. It was madness. It was chaos. As shocking as the Quantumania situation already is, let's not forget that it is far from the first instance of this happening. For instance, recently it was revealed that the WandaVision VFX workers were also dealing with a similar situation. They were overworked. They were forced to fix things until the very last minute, especially for the season finale of WandaVision. And then also you had the Spider-Man No Way Home VFX workers working in a time crunch bunch as well. I'm not sure if they were in the Marvel Studios camp or in the Sony camp, but like I said, industry-wide, this is an issue, especially for blockbuster films these days. But yeah, Spider-Man No Way Home also had that same problem, as did Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, which also faced a bunch of reshoots and also had to have its VFX worked on until the very last second. And of course, we had last year's Thor Love and Thunder, which also suffered infamously from terrible VFX shots, which led to it being a laughing stock, including by the director himself, with Taika Waititi making jokes about it, which I think was in real bad faith. But yeah, it's been a problem for a while now, but it seems as though Ant-Man Quantumania was the straw that broke the camel's back, both for the VFX workers and also for the Disney executives. Let's talk about the Disney executives first of all, because it was announced earlier this year that Victoria Alonso had been let go from Marvel Studios. I don't know if you guys saw this, but this was a huge deal, because Victoria Alonso was one of the main producers working at Marvel Studios since the very beginning. If you've noticed during the credits of any Marvel film, you see that it's always been Kevin Feige, Victoria Alonso and Luis Desposito, and Victoria Alonso was literally let go earlier this year because of the issue of VFX, because she was a different kind of producer to Kevin Feige. Unlike Kevin Feige, who oversees everything, she was mostly in charge of VFX, you know, special effects, animation within Marvel Studios. And apparently she was hellish to work with, or rather to work for. Apparently a lot of the VFX artists just really did not like working under her for various reasons. Various allegations were made, and that's why primarily she was let go. Also, the fact that Bob Iger just was not happy with the reception of Quantumania, and that, like I said, that was the final straw. She had to go. Now, the official reason that was given by Disney was something to do with her promoting a rival project like Argentina, which came out last year. It was a documentary or drama or something. But yeah, she promoted that, being, you know, Hispanic herself, and so apparently that's what Disney was annoyed about, and that's why they fired her. That was just the official line though, allegedly, because in reality it had a lot to do with her involvement in the VFX department at Marvel. So that already was a huge deal. But then another blow came to the studio more recently in September, when the VFX department voted unanimously like literally everyone has had enough. Okay, they voted unanimously to unionize, and that means that they are going to be represented by a union in order to secure their workplace rights, as they should, by the way. I'm completely in support of unionizing and being supported by a union, because these companies will take the piss wherever they can, okay, as seen by the hardships that have been faced by the VFX department for years now. But on the flip side, it's a disaster for Marvel Studios, because of course from their perspective, they're no longer going to be able to get away with the mess that they have been doing up until now. They're likely going to have to pay the VFX workers their worth. Imagine that. Imagine that. Like, oh, we had to pay for these writers, we had to pay for these actors, and now we have to pay for VFX artists. Just kill me now. Kevin Feige is rocking back and forth in a corner like, I can't believe this is happening to me. You know, Bob Iger cannot believe the unluckiness he has been facing, and on Disney's centenary, no less. Like, it's a 100th year anniversary of Disney, and they are just facing one of the worst times in their history. It's hilarious. Anyways, good on the VFX workers, okay, and the animators have been next, which is long overdue. But yeah, that is yet another disastrous impact of Ant-Man Quantumania for the studio. The next headline that we are going to be breaking down is to do with Blade. Guys, this genuinely is just so annoying to me. Like, I am so pissed. I'm pissed about all of this, right? I'm pissed about all of this as a devoted MCU fan. This is my like 10-year anniversary. Speaking of anniversaries, this is my 10-year anniversary of being an MCU fan, because 10 years ago I watched the first Avengers film for the first time and fell in love with the franchise. So like, this is supposed to be a happy time for me. I'm supposed to be having a great old time being an MCU fan, watching all of these different projects, but instead I'm here sitting down making this video. Anyway, but the next topic at hand brings me so much sorrow, because it's like, how did we get here? Like, that's so stupid. That's so ridiculous. And that is the just destruction, chaos and madness and nonsense surrounding the Blade project. I don't know how you get something so perfect so wrong. Like, so a few years back it was announced that Marvel Studios would be working on Blade, and it would be starring Mahershala Ali. Now, mind you, Mahershala Ali is already in the MCU. Let's not forget, Mahershala Ali has already had an incredible debut in the MCU as Cottonmouth, the main villain in the first half, at least, of Luke Cage season 1. He was so brilliant, so iconic, so amazing, and that visual of him standing in front of that Biggie picture with the crown lopsided on his head will always be ingrained in my mind. That was such an iconic character, and it was a travesty that they killed him prematurely. But anyway, the Mahershala Ali isn't new to the game. He's already an MCU alumni, but because he's so talented, because he's so brilliant, and because he's a two-time Academy Award winner, okay, he has earned every right to come back and inhabit yet another character. This time an even more, iconic and known character in the form of Blade. When this was announced, it was just like perfection. Like, it was like, oh yeah, like this makes sense. The sky is blue. Grass is green, the sky is blue, and Mahershala Ali is Blade. Like, yeah, we're making sense. But since that stroke of brilliance, since that stroke of genius, in recent years, all we have heard is just bad news. All we have heard is just this project being dragged through the mud. I don't understand what's going on. There have been so many different writers attached to this project. I think it's like seven different writers attached to Blade. What? There have been different directors attached to Blade. Like, literally, they've lost about 2 or 3 directors from this project. Huh? That's literally insane. And to make matters worse, most recently it was revealed that in one of the iterations of the script, Blade was going to get 4th billing in his own film. 4th billing behind 3 female characters. Now, what? Huh? Like, how was that allowed? How was that permitted to happen? And they were shooting this, mind you. They were shooting this script. So like, people were coming onto set and like, they've memorized those stupid lines and they're ready to act that out. How could Blade have 4th billing in his own film? How does that work? Guys, how does that... What, the sense is not being made here. Like, the script is not scripting. Mind you, it's an introductory film. Like, we're not even in the 5th one or the 6th one. You know, like, we've had 17 Blades and we're ready to give other characters the spotlight. No. This is his first film and he was supposed to get 4th billing. Guys, if that's not a cry for help, I don't know what is. This 4th billing situation is preposterous for several reasons. For many reasons. First of all, you have Mahershala Ali, 2-time Academy Award winner, Mahershala Ali, on board with your project, and you want to overshadow him with who exactly? Unless it's like Viola Davis. Then number 2, to have the story be female centric. That seems really malicious to me. I'm starting to think that this is an inside job. I'm starting to think that this is an inside job, because ain't no way a real proponent of female representation would do that to a female character. Ain't no way. I'm starting to something in the milk came clean here, because what do you mean you were gonna have a project led by 3 women with Mahershala Ali getting 4th billing? Something is not right. Someone needs to check what's going on at Marvel Studios, because this is insane. Kevin Feige, where are you? They are wrecking your shit. I can already smell the putrid, hateful toxicity that would face these women if this version of the script had been made. That it would have been a catastrophe. These toxic fans hated She-Hulk in her own show. The show was called She-Hulk and they were upset with her. These toxic fans hated Miss Marvel in her own show. The show was called Miss Marvel and they still hated her. But imagine 3 female characters with more screen time than Blade in a Blade movie. Oh, it would have been so over. Oh my, I dread to even think about it. I have shivers, I have goosebumps. I'm so glad they avoided that train wreck. Now listen, there seems to be a little bit of hope here, because they did recently hire a brand new writer for the film. They took on Michael Green, who is an Academy Award nominee, who wrote Logan. Another revelation that was revealed in this article in relation to the Blade movie is that the desired budget for the film is currently under $100 million. And I have mixed feelings about this. I feel kind of salty about it, if I'm being honest. I'm not saying a film about a centuries-old vampire or half vampire needs to be, you know, $250 million. I'm not saying that. But the idea that they would have this mandate of like, oh, make sure you make it for less than $100 million. Like, how dare you? Like, that's so unfair. Mahershala Ali came on board. He used the credits that he got from 2 Oscars, okay, to come on board to a Marvel project, and he's been sticking it out. He could have left a long time ago. He should have left a long time ago, okay? But he's clearly really passionate about this, and so he used all of that, you know, good credit that he had from those Oscars that he won to stay on board on this Marvel project, and he seems to have faith in it and believe in it, although that's been tested many times. And now you want to put this mandate of like, oh, we're only going to spend less than 100 million on this thing, like this thing that's doomed to fail or whatever. Meanwhile, you're spending 250 million on She-Hulk and Secret Invasion. Like, you're prioritizing the wrong things. You're prioritizing the wrong things, Marvel. Oh, there's so many issues here. Oh, there's so, if Blade, it flops because of the stupid creative decisions, the limited budget, and any other reason that Marvel, Kevin Feige, is to blame for, I'm gonna be beyond pissed. I'm gonna be, and also at this point, Kevin Feige, if you're only gonna spend less than $100 million on this Blade movie, then guess what? You may as well make it R-rated. You may as well make it R-rated. Oh, no more excuses now. It's not going to cost 250 million. So make it R-rated and do a good job of it. So that's it when it comes to the topic of quality control or lack thereof within Marvel Studios as of late. So now seems to be a good time as any to bring out the second poll that I dropped in my community posts. And that was, what in your opinion is the worst MCU movie post-Endgame? And here we have from lowest to highest percentage. At 11%, you guys voted Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. At 22%, there was The Eternals. At 26%, Thor, Love and Thunder came in second place. But then in first place at 40%, again almost half here, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So those are the results of the poll for the worst MCU movie post-Endgame. So first comment up we have from Ross, once again, hi Ross, and they said, this is a hard one for me. Quantumania is the worst movie in my opinion. However, Multiverse of Madness is the one that made me the most mad, which is fitting to be fair. They had Wanda on such a good path and really set her up to be a power player for this saga. But no, Waldron decided to speed run her Delulu villain story and do a terrible job. Exactly. Strange was a useless thumb. Strange was a useless thumb for most of the movie too, to be honest. It's a real shame. I desperately wanted to be invested in these characters that are in the forefront now. I was waiting for the old Avengers to move aside so this lot would get their time to shine too, but it doesn't look like it's happening. Couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. Okay, so next comment up is from, oh, this is hard to read. Is K Trash, is that the name? Oh, sorry. Hi. And hopefully you're not trash. But they said definitely Thor. Screaming goats, get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. Yeah, the screaming goats, they were fun at first, but I think because so much of the film was so grating that the screaming goats started to encompass everything that was wrong with the film. Next up, we have another comment from Eliana, who says, The Eternals. Every single aspect of this movie was horrendous, including the directing. Totally shattered my hope of seeing a more sophisticated MCU movie. Yeah, I also think The Eternals was bad. I know that there are some Eternals apologists, but if you see my review, you know that I was not too kind to that film. I really wasn't a fan of it at all. It was so boring, and I saw the potential for what they were trying to do, and it missed the mark so much that it just, again, annoyed the hell out of me. So yeah, I'm also not a fan of Eternals. And finally, we have a comment from Gleek0814, who said, quality-wise, Quantumania is the worst Marvel movie post-Endgame. But in my head, Multiverse of Madness is worse because of how sloppy the storytelling was. Some of the costumes and visual effects were really bad, and most of it made me very angry at the end of it. Yeah, I also agree with that. Okay, so now that we have discussed the major topic of quality control or lack thereof in the MCU as of late, it's time to dive into the final main topic that was highlighted in the Variety article. And this doesn't actually have anything to do with quality control because a lot of this was out of Kevin Feige's hands. This, ironically, is all about the main big bad of the multiverse saga. Yes, earlier this year, a lot of us were shocked to see the news of Jonathan Majors being arrested in New York over a domestic violence incident. Now, because these things tend to take a lot of time in the courts, and also it's COVID, and also he's a celebrity, this hasn't really been resolved, legally speaking, so we don't know the outcome of the case yet. But in the months preceding this trial, there have unfortunately been additional headlines surrounding Jonathan Majors' behavior. He was let go by CAA earlier this year, and they were his representative as a talent, and they sacrificed a whole bunch of money that he had before, at least in his contracts, including the contract that he had with Marvel, because they couldn't keep him as a client over his abusive behavior. So apparently he's been acting abusively and aggressively towards members of staff in the CAA, and that's why they let him go. And that certainly, of course, does not help his case surrounding this domestic abuse incident with his ex-girlfriend. And unfortunately, going back to the Variety article here, it highlights yet another incident that actually took place in London whilst he was filming Loki season 2. Oh my goodness. But there was yet another domestic violence incident between him and his ex-girlfriend who was working on the Loki show as a movement coordinator. That ended up with her being hospitalized as well. And these official publicized incidents, on top of previous incidents that have been highlighted by some people who knew him from school, from Yale Drama School, where it was said that he also had issues with aggression and abuse dealing with some of his fellow colleagues there, have not painted a good picture for Jonathan Jonathan Majors in the slightest. This has been a huge PR disaster for the actor, and it's crazy to consider. I mean, you want to talk about a downfall. This was a monumental downfall this year, because if you remember earlier on in the year, he had, you know, so much promise, so much potential. People were really excited about him, and we loved his appearance in Loki season 1, and we were eager to see him pop up in Ant-Man Quantumania. And even when Ant-Man Quantumania ended up being a huge disappointment, he still came out on top as one of the highlights of the film. And then of course he was in an actual good film with Creed 3, which was, you know, directed by Michael B. Jordan, and he also co-starred alongside him, and he made for a really great character and antagonist in that film as well. On top of this, he also got some early Oscar buzz for his small drama called Magazine Dreams, where he portrays a MMA fighter, I believe, and so, you know, he was looking real dense, you know, in that footage, and it seemed like he gave an astonishing performance there, and that was acquired by Searchlight, formerly Fox Searchlight, which is now owned by Disney, and they were, you know, going to distribute it and push it for award season as well, but that has been dropped indefinitely by Disney's camp. I didn't really talk about it much in my other videos because I don't typically talk about things like this, about PR disasters, but, you know, in terms of my thoughts on the issue, looking at this whole picture holistically, I think it doesn't look good for Jonathan Majors at all. I think he's done, pretty much. He is done in the MCU. I don't see them moving forward with Avengers Kang Dynasty at the very least. You know, I don't think it makes sense for him to star in that film, unless, you know, we'll talk about the alternative in a second, but I think that project should be cancelled if the only way they want to do it is with Jonathan Majors at its center, because that would just make no sense. I mean, imagine him trying to do press for Avengers Kang Dynasty. Like, it would be like Ezra Miller with The Flash. Like, it's just, no, it's dead on arrival, so don't even bother doing that. But aside from the MCU of it all, I mean, I mentioned the MCU part because obviously this is an MCU video, but aside from that, I just think it's really shameful and really disappointing to see these allegations come out about this actor that I was really excited about and was really looking forward to seeing, you know, more of what he was going to be in. It was just like really shocking to me, as I said, and to me, like, I would just never be able to see him in the same way. To me, this whole image of this person is so negative and so toxic, and even the way that his legal team has handled things and how they've tried to hide information and come out with these statements and these texts that were supposed to exonerate him but just made matters worse. This whole thing is really ugly to me, and so I cannot see the actor in the same way. To me, it's just like, get rid of him, okay? I don't care. You know, people have been saying innocent until proven guilty, but first of all, that's not actually how the law works. Like, first of all, okay, hi, I'm Jean and I'm a legal graduate, and first of all, that's not really strictly how the law works. It's not as simple as innocent until proven guilty, especially when you're a black man in America, one, but also famous and wealthy and well-resourced too. Like, when it comes to those two things, the way that the law works is a little bit more it's a little bit more we'll see, basically. We'll see how this goes. If you do a bad thing, you will face consequences, hopefully. You will hopefully face consequences, and so if Jonathan Majors has done these things and if he has behaved in these ways, then he deserves to face the consequences of his actions, regardless of what superhero franchise he's associated with. And as a final point to this, as I alluded to earlier, I think one way that Marvel could move forward with Avengers Kang Dynasty is if they recast Kang. And as a lot of people have been saying, I think Kang is one of the easiest characters ever to recast. Like, there's literally no reason why Kang has to be played by Jonathan Jonathan Majors only. In fact, in the end credits scene in Quantumania, yes, we did see a bunch of Jonathan Majorses portraying Kang, but we also saw like a lizard guy, like we saw a bunch of different species that were also Kang. So like we know it's a possibility that some of the variants could look different, so why not just hire another actor to portray the character for Avengers Kang Dynasty. Start introducing this other variant earlier on so that we can become invested in that version, and then have them have their own film with Kang Dynasty. To be fair, I think it's important for them to stick to Kang being a black man, because otherwise the black community will feel like they've lost, you know, that representation because of Jonathan Majors' antics, which is a shame, especially because we've also lost Chadwick Boseman and Blade seems to be on fire. So like you gotta give us something. I know that Captain America is coming up, so that's great, but you know, we had Kang, so let's just keep Kang and let's hire someone like, oh, I don't know, like Aldous Hodge. You know, like Aldous Hodge, you know, he was in Black Adam and he was one of the best parts of Black Adam. I think he would make a great Kang as well. Or we could go with Trevante Rhodes from Academy Award winning Moonlight, one of the best films ever. Speaking of Mahershala Ali, so I think Trevante Rhodes as a Kang variant would be a brilliant choice as well. Okay, so we have discussed some pretty heavy things here, guys. I think it's safe to say that Marvel has been facing a whole bunch of problems, and I'm sure they are just racking their brains trying to figure out how they can get through this period of difficulty. But despite how doom and gloom it has looked, you know, throughout this year and also throughout this video, I still think there's a glimmer of hope. I think that it's expected, honestly, that Marvel would stumble across some issues, especially after such a height like Avengers Endgame and then a pandemic which tripped all of us up, okay? I think it's understandable that this would happen. And not to mention, you know, whilst Disney is celebrating its centenary, where it's also faced a bunch of periods of struggles as well, Marvel is celebrating 15 years, you know, of the MCU. And so, you know, the last 2 years out of 15 being a little bit rocky, that's not terrible. Honestly, that's not the worst thing in the world, okay? I mean, it could be way worse. It could be DC. So yeah, I don't think we're in DC territory quite yet, but you know, whilst last year I said that the alarm bells were ringing, this year I think it's safe to say that we're all in the bunker and we're trying to figure out how to navigate the next steps forward. But to end things on a positive note, the final poll that I posted for you guys was to name the best MCU project post-Endgame. And the results here were really encouraging. It was pretty evenly spread out, which was nice to see. But the lowest result was particularly surprising to me, because at 13% we had Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. That is really shocking, because I think Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was like so brilliant and probably really up there in terms of best MCU projects post Endgame, but only 13% of you guys voted for that one. Next up at 14%, you guys said one of the MCU Disney Plus shows. Next up at number 16 was Shang-Chi. A lot of people mentioned Shang-Chi in the comments as well, I remember, but that was a great outing. And again, like, where is he? We want to see more from him. They did such a good job of introducing the character, and then he just disappeared because they have so much on their plate that they can't circle back to him anytime soon. Okay, so next up at 24%, we have Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I'm so happy to see so many of you guys voted Wakanda Forever, because I feel like a lot of people forget about that film. Like, people will be like, oh, the MCU is so bad, and it's like, yeah, but we got Wakanda Forever. Like, Wakanda Forever is actually excellent. It's actually brilliant. But your pick, coming in at 33%, was Spider-Man No Way Home. So yeah, that was also a really brilliant addition to the franchise, certainly one of the best ones. The only thing that annoyed me about Spider-Man No Way Home was Doctor Strange. Like, he was just so out of character in that film, and also I do think it was best viewed that first time with an audience, because the second and third viewings aren't quite the same. But still, you guys are absolutely right. That was definitely one of the very best projects that we have gotten recently from Marvel. So you see, even in the sea of negativity, even with all of this fog and these clouds of hopelessness, there is still some hope somewhere in there, because you guys are still really enjoying some of the projects from phases 4 and 5 of the MCU. So if they can take some cues and do more of the good and avoid the bad, then there could be a way out of this. But we shall see, because they have a lot going on that's already queued up and ready to go, and we don't know how effectively they'll be able to course correct, and if there'll be an audience left for them by the time that they manage to do so. But in the meantime, guys, that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on the downfall of Marvel Studios, it's crazy to say, but it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of these, different topics, as well as you guys' results on these polls down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch you videos coming up, including perhaps a fix-it video in the near future. We shall see how things go. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.